Welcome to KIMEcast, where we break through and cut the BS in sports medicine, rehabilitation, and sports performance, and talk about how things really work. Welcome to KIMEcast. Tony Russ Dunning. So in an interesting turn of events, a couple weeks ago, this week before Thanksgiving, I had a trip planned, and Russ had a trip planned, and they were the identical trip. But neither of us knew that information until the trip was over. And then I was talking with Jesse, who runs our talent and culture at Kime and produces this podcast. And I texted her, and she's like, well, Russ is there. I'm like, no, he's not. And she's like, no, yes, he is. So sure enough. So we had planned, when you get to this, we have kids the same age, live in the same community. So there's exactly 4 weeks a year that we can vacation. Then Thanksgiving is one of them. Each spring break is one of them. Mine are split, but yours are not split, right? Different school system. And then the first week of June, and other than that, that's it. That's the only options you get.
That's when you go. Yeah, apparently that's when you go. It's when the whole world goes.
Yeah, so oftentimes. So nonetheless, we ended up in Disneyland. We each had like 2 days there. Thank goodness we were in different parks on different days. It would have been really odd to see you and not know you were there. But our wives cannot figure out how this is possible that we can spend so much time together and yet have no idea what each other are doing. That literally we both drove down there, had almost the same experience, and then drove back and had no clue. But anyway, that was great. So would have been fun to see you there, like I said, but different parks anyway, and there's plenty of things to do.
Well, we're trying to save the world, so talking about Disneyland before it even happens is kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It just doesn't really fit into the schedule. I get asked all the time, what's Russ doing this week? I have no idea Russ is doing this weekend. I don't know what he did yesterday.
He probably doesn't even know either.
Yeah, we haven't been told yet. No, but what was cool, I do want to talk about the trip, because I know for me it was, I had two thoughts while I was there, and I was like, we need to talk about this, because it's an amazing opportunity to go there and see so many thousands of people all in one place at one time, and walking around. It's definitely like, for me, it's a 25, 30,000 step day, and I have a patient who does 30,000 steps a day every day, which is amazing, but that's a lot for me at least. So, but anyways, to see this many people walking and moving around, I thought was really interesting. So two big takeaways that I had is, one, I want to talk about people, the way they move, and some observations I made of just the population, and then I think the food there, I think is well worth discussing. And I'm not a food guy, so this is not on the positive side of the equation. I'm not sure I could have stayed there another day from a food standpoint. I mean, it was so, not that it didn't taste good at times, but holy moly, it was difficult to process. But so people-wise, I thought it was amazing, like watching this many like gait cycles and looking at people walk and move and gait, and just like the size, shape, frame of people. I mean, as a therapist, it's odd, but yeah, I definitely am walking around checking everybody out, just paying attention to what's going on with people. But one thing, so my daughter, she was wearing Crocs. The first day was her choice of footwear, which was, totally typical for an 11-year-old, but ill-advised. But I advised her, I said, hey, Jade, when you wear those shoes, like, she definitely would evert her calcaneus or go into eversion, and then she just pronates right through it. And she's kind of like tall for her age. She's starting not to be tall for her age, but she's kind of lanky. And that knee just kind of looks like it wants to valgus, but doesn't quite. Mm-hmm. But then she gets that foot to evert, that knee just wants to dive in. And so I was like, hey, as we walk today, think about landing on the lateral aspect of that heel, which, I showed her what that means, and then push through your big toe and become more active in your gait instead of this passive like collapse. And I'm like, look at that person there. Look at see the knee collapsing? Do you see how the knee just hit the other knee? And look at that person. Did you see how that went? Do you see that? See what I'm talking about? Like, everybody in front of us was like just collapsing left and right. And she's like, yeah, I see. I said, that's not athletic. Like, that's not healthy. Like, that's going to cause breakdown. And, if you want to be strong, do that. And those shoes you're wearing are so soft, they just kind of like throw you into that motion. Because when you have weight on you, the body wants to pronate, evert and pronate. It's how it absorbs weight and load. So that's normal for the body to do that reaction, but it's not normal to do it immediately or without control, right? Mm-hmm. So I was just giving her that tip. And then, of course, we recommended a shoe change, but that was for the next day at that point, because as a dad, I recognized it later than I should have, but nonetheless.
Well, it's definitely the land of the Hokas.
Right.
It's the land of the ultra foam, because you're living on, not just concrete, but like kind of asphalt, and the asphalt, concrete, and just everywhere. So it's definitely the land of the big well.
Did you see this too? Yeah. Did you have?
Yeah. I think we're involved in a lot of activities, and in all activities, people are usually moving. So we myself, my family live in a very much of a movement culture. So when you go to Disneyland, you're not in a movement culture anymore. People are walking, true, but you're in the land of kind of just like, I guess, the normal state that, like almost, United States at homeostasis, so to speak. And it's grim because you're seeing, you've got the adult obesity epidemic. That's for sure. The stats on that are staggering and horrible. But the worst thing is the youth. It's the amount of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are way too big for their size. They're carrying body fat, which you shouldn't have a 10-year-old carrying a lot of body fat,
right?
Nor an 11 or 12-year-old. That tells me they've been doing the wrong things for the last 5 years. They've accumulated that mass.
Now, I'll just, you know this already, so just for the audience, like there will be moments that there's going to be the kid will be a bit larger and then they'll have a growth spurt and lean up, right? So we're not necessarily talking about that.
Yeah, no, I think for, when you see a normal 10-year-old boy, they should weigh, 90 pounds, 80 pounds?
Should probably, yeah.
Yeah, well, when you see, what should be maybe 80 pounds at, I must got mixed up, 4'8", and they're 30 pounds overweight. That type of weight, not like a little pudgy around the cheeks or a little pudgy around the midsection. Like they just got too much weight. What happens is then they get into this collapse. The feet start to walk like a duck.
Yes.
They start to pronate excessively, and they're living on the inside of the foot.
Yeah,
and then the knees are kind of forced inward.
Weight.
Yeah. So once you see this, like the foot change and the skeletal change, that's tied with the weight. Now we have a really big problem.
Yeah. And it can be weight for sure. So we know that load, everybody's got a backpack on there as well, so a little bit extra load there. But it's also weakness. Like this is you can load your body, and if your body and your arch are strong and your foot is strong and your glutes and glute med are strong, you can resist this overpronation problem. That's, it's so well described like in the foot industry. So if you're in the running community, we talked about pronation. Pronation is not a bad thing. Pronation is a very normal thing. And it's needed as a shock absorber. It's a controller of how you move and of how you absorb the load. It's a very, very critical part of the process. Where it gets to be wrong is where you have early pronation, and in some cases excessive or too much. But worst of all is that you don't return to supination. So before you take your next step, your foot should go pronation and then supinate and lock, and then you should be able to push off. And that's the moment that we see most people fail. Is they just stay pronated, stay flat, and then they just kind of the foot just kind of melts into the ground, and there's no transfer of force. It's just kind of like a momentum, like whoop, it just kind of goes through.
Now, I would bet quite a bit of money that this is the distinction between you can say like the different type of body types. There's all versions of healthy body types and how they're shaped, but there's not a body type that likes to accumulate visceral fat. So when you have a lot of visceral fat around the belly that accumulates, and you don't have the leg strength to hold on to that, that's when you see these patterns. So if someone if you have a bit of a thicker kid, they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, they're a bit just on the thick side, maybe they're going to be the future linebacker in football, whatever. You're going to find strength with the legs that goes really nicely with that weight. But if you've got a rather thin thigh and all this visceral fat in the middle, that's where we're going to see the toes like to go out. You're going to get the retroversion of the hips, which is a skeletal change. So now you have the weight on a young person, and it actually changes their skeleton to hold on to this weight because the skeleton keeps growing until most kids are about, let's call it 15, 16, 17 in that realm. So if you accumulate too much visceral fat around the midsection early on, your hips and femurs and tibia alignments, it has to change to hold on to that if you don't have the muscle to support that. So if you have a sedentary kid that is accumulating weight in the middle, you are changing their skeleton forever. That's kind of crazy that you can actually do a permanent damage at this phase that gives you more predisposed to low back pain, knee arthritis, hip arthritis, in the future.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's a scary thought. And we see it's all too much. We see it here. So all around, but obviously in that situation with that many people, it was a pretty obvious.
Yeah, and if eating at Disneyland is your normal behavior, just normally kind of corn dogs, hamburgers, hot dogs, and nachos with Coke. Whew. There's no way the human can do that at any type of scale, even if it's just twice a week. There's no way you can do that and not have these things happening to your skeleton, to your liver, to your visceral fat. It's all an accumulation.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine how the digestive system functions. It was too bad, because we actually didn't seek out like, let's go find the best restaurants or like the best food. Like we didn't do that, and we didn't really have time for that, and didn't plan. You had to plan that shit like 6 months in advance, I think now. So we didn't do any of those things. We just took the food as it came to us and found reasonable places, but tried to find reasonable options at the normal, like, cafeteria style venues or whatever they have, all the different places. We ate in 6 different places in 2 days. And all of them are sit down type venues, and like, oh my goodness, like they're finding a reasonable choice was like
very hard.
Very hard. And it shouldn't be like that. Like here you're like, educating America's youth, and it's the dream place and all these great things, but yet here you are like really condoning like this terrible diet, which is going to lead to a terrible future, as you just said. It's horrible.
It's so sad, because the company could easily realign values and say we want to be there for the youth. We already influence the youth with all of the movies and programs that we have. But we can motivate them in a healthy way at what? Just a little bit of a cost. Take a trim off their profit margin. And so it's really sad that they can't actually take that bull by the horns.
Yeah, I don't think it's a cost issue. It seems to be a preference, which is hard when they're like, if they are catering to that group and that is the normal food, and like that for that reason they're catering to it because that's what people buy. Yeah. Like that's a scary thought in its own. Like even if that's the case, just throw a little bit of broccoli on there or something, maybe a couple green beans. Just anything green for 2 days was impossible to find. Yeah. It was unbelievable. And I know they can do it. You've been on a Disney cruise. Yeah. I've been on a Disney cruise. Yeah. The food is amazing.
Yeah, they do a good job there.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. A lot of choices.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids are eating salmon every night. Like they're eating like good, healthy like options.
The cruise does a good job with like different portions, and they have like, the salad with it, and like some fruit options and vegetable options. Yeah.
They have the whole thing. They get
simple protein, it's like
They keep it clean for the kids. The kids love it. It's amazing, And obviously adult food's amazing, but then in the park it's like this absolute nightmare. Yeah.
I guess that's carnival food.
Ugh. Oh, it really was. It's horrible. My son obviously has a limited, not all these kids eat limited things. Like he'll eat a burger with nothing on it, So I think he was averaging like 3 a day. And I told him that when we went, I said, hey, food's going to be, the kid has to eat like 4 times a day. Like he's always hungry. It's unbelievable at this point. I'm like, hey, food's going to be a challenge for you today. And when you say I'm hungry, it'll probably take us an hour to get food. So I need to know like way in advance. And here's, bring your snack options, protein bars.
We got to plan that out.
Yeah, we had to plan it out. So he was pretty good about that. And then we did it. And even then I was like, man, I'm like, what do you want off the menu? He's like, I guess I'll just have a burger again. I'm like, I don't see any other option for you. So I get it. It's either that or a hot dog. So I guess we'll go with the burger,
Or some fried chicken.
Yeah, you get fried chicken at a fair amount of the time as well. I don't know. It's just disappointing. I was super disappointed in that. But I'm still hopeful they can turn that around, and for the people, I think that people can move better, they could be healthier, they could do they could do better things, and you could just see like that the amount of people that were just accepting and then there's really active folks there too that look well, move well, and do a lot of things well. But when you look at the population, there was 70-80% who had this terrible gait cycle where the foot's just compromised completely. You see people like postures all forward, flex forward, not extending through their hips, walking. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like a therapy nightmare. Yeah,
it's tough. I lately I've been on my own venture. I put a continuous glucose monitor on the back of my arm, and it monitors, and I get to evaluate all of my meals and really kind of quickly learn how tough was that meal on my blood sugar specifically, which speaks to my insulin sensitivity. And if I'm not appropriately sensitive to that blood sugar, then I become insulin resistant, which is so it's not really. I'm not taking it I'm not learning for the purpose of avoiding diabetes, which is what everyone's asked. Like, oh, are you afraid you're going to get diabetes? I've been utterly convinced, 100% convinced, that health starts with food, and the best way of me understanding that is to evaluate my blood sugar to kind of see the load of the meal. And I have half a mind of asking which one of my 3 kids, of paying one of my 3 kids to actually do it, just to see how much I'm venturing in a weird dad mode. But when I go
You
back
mean
to
using them as test subjects?
yeah, just
I think
like
you're
you're
probably
like,
right
hey,
on.
this won't hurt. Bam, just put in the back of their arm, and now I'm learning their sugar load throughout the day.
I wouldn't be surprised that coming from you at all.
Yeah, but they've asked me smart questions. I think it was my 10-year-old that asked, Daddy, if I eat things that are no, she asked, how does someone get fat? And then I said, well, oddly enough, you don't collect excessive adipose tissue around your girth, which we know is visceral fat. You don't accumulate it. You don't get it by eating fat. That's the weird thing. Eating fat can be quite healthy, especially if it's nuts and fish and
Critical of bodily function.
yeah.
People
yeah,
forget
they're
about that.
Critical. You look at your HDL profile and talk with your doctor about your HDLs, and you quickly learn you need healthy fats for your nervous system, immune system.
We'll come back to that point in a second, but
Yeah, and I said you actually, if you accumulate a lot of energy in the form of sugar, which would be mostly processed foods, and you don't use it, well, then your body wants to shuttle that extra energy that you didn't use and put it into fat. And so it was a nice conversation about that. But I had half a mind of putting a glucose monitor in one of the kids.
So what have you learned on this monitor so far?
I've learned if I have, the phrase death by 1,000 cuts definitely comes to mind. Because if I have a bad meal and my blood sugar spikes by more than 30 milligrams per deciliter, so it measures in numbers. The numbers should be between 70 and 140. And so if you eat a meal and it goes north of 30, say you have like a 16 milligram per deciliter hit, the question that people ask is, oh, what was so bad about that meal? And I had one meal where I had a Hawaiian bread, and then I had a graham cracker, and then I had an orange, and then I had quiche, and then I had a little marshmallow fruit salad because it was at post-Thanksgiving. It was like a Thanksgiving thing. So and a little bit of cranberry juice. So not one of those things you would say like, oh, that's so horrible. But if
marshmallow thing, perhaps.
Perhaps. But if you have all six, apparently that's horrible. that destroyed me for many hours. And oddly enough, I took a nap about 2 hours after that meal, and Margie was like, what's wrong with you? You okay? I'm like, no, I'm so lethargic. And then upon looking at my glucose monitor, and you could see the incredible spike, and then the dip. It's like, oh, okay. So don't do that. But so death by 1,000 cuts for sure. But I also learned if you have, unfortunately, sugar with your coffee or donut or sweetened yogurt, anything that's like added sweet, it does make it very hard to live as healthy as I want to live.
In that category, you said staying inside that band is really difficult to do.
Yeah, very difficult. So if you're gonna have yogurt,
under 130, you're trying to be under.
Yeah, I'm trying to be under 120. And I try, 140 would be good. 120 is like phenomenal. So I want to be phenomenal because why not? Sure. I'm doing the damn thing, right? So I want to be phenomenal, but to have a meal that doesn't give me more than a 30 milligram per deciliter, so more than a 30 hit, means that it can't have added sweet. So whenever we say like, oh, I'm just going to put a little bit of sugar in it, like, wow, you can't have that. And what that does is it does, if you did a normal blood test with a doctor, this is the triglyceride number. It's so blood sugar, excessive blood sugar, your body won't like that. It needs to do something with it, and then that's how your body accumulates triglycerides, right. and then subsequently, visceral fat. So if you hop on a scale, and all these fancy scales that only cost like $45, they do a little magic. They put like little electrical signal through your body, and they say, oh, you get visceral fat of 8, whatever. So when it scores that visceral fat, it is your belly fat, and so all these numbers kind of coincide of how many high glycemic index type foods are you eating? Are you eating too many of them at once? So you kind of learn, well, maybe I want these 3 things. Maybe I do want to have a graham cracker, and I do want to have a piece of bread, and then I do want to have a tangerine. Don't have them in the same meal, and whenever you eat one of those 3, eat protein first. So you kind of like learn these strategies of reducing the hit on your liver and on your blood sugar.
I thought that was interesting. I think Drew did that a few years ago. One of our therapists on the team tested this out like a year or 2 ago, the same idea, and he came back with that. If you ate protein first, it really subdued the spike of the insulin response. Yeah,
say protein or fat. It blunts the load. It's the most amazing learning I've ever done. You have to be a little data. You have to be okay with data. My wife was like, I don't think I'm going to like that because I'm not going to like so much data. And so I definitely think you kind of have to be friends with numbers, you know.
Yeah, and be really like self-aware, because you'd eat something and it's relatively instant, right? But you have to track it for the next 10 or 20 minutes.
Yes.
But if you ate a bunch of stuff in that period, you're going to get worse data, right? So if you're actually doing research.
Right. So ideally you want to kind of document a little bit of your meal, learn what it did. But I've developed with the help of Dr. Casey Means and the book Good Energy, phenomenal book, phenomenal doctor, because she's going out on a limb saying these wide ranges that medicine's promoting, that's not good enough. If you want to be barely not sick, then you can pay attention to these big ranges. As we know, with like the resting heart rate, what's normal resting heart rate? The books will say 60 to 100.
Yeah,
if you're like
ridiculous.
north of 75 as a resting heart rate, you're like not good. But yet these ranges, they basically say, well, you're not dying at the moment. So the ranges are really quite BS.
Well, and the idea that 60 is the low end is also so far from the truth.
Yeah.
It's really astonishing when you have like someone who runs and they have a resting heart rate of like 39 to like 45, which most people think that's impossible. But if you have an endurance athlete on your hands, that's very, very normal.
It has to be the standard.
And it's too bad that like that person goes to the hospital and they think that you're dying.
Yeah.
Like that's so insulting.
That's how far off we've got with what is optimal.
Yeah.
But Dr. Means has really kind of taken all of those numbers and helped redefine what a healthy range that you should be shooting for. And so with my blood glucose, I am shooting for my average glucose of less than 100 throughout for the day. My all meals, I want less than 30 hit increase with the meal. It's a good meal. And then when I wake up in the morning, that'd be your fasting glucose. I want it to be less than 90. So I have to eat very good to do those things.
And so if you say you had it resting at about 90, and then it jumped to 30 points to put you at the 120, which is what you're trying to stay at or under for elite. Mm-hmm. So then choosing what food is the critical factor there.
Yep. And if I lived on a farm, this would be easy. If you had your own milk and you had your own beef and you raised your own get your own berries and you had some potatoes in the backyard, it's actually quite easy. As soon as you touch a thing with a box around it that's been manufactured and has some sweet in it, now it starts to get very difficult, because everything that's been processed unfortunately dissolves so quickly in your mouth, and once it gets your gut, it loads your blood instantly. Your body didn't have to work to extrapolate that energy. And that's I think the key thing of processed food is not when you look at the ingredients and it says grain and maybe sugar's fourth on the list and got some salt and got some other crap that you can't pronounce. It's how quickly it loads up your body. When you have a Dorito or Cheez-It or a potato thing, it's all these things they hit you way too quick. Body's not designed to do that.
I think that's a super interesting point. I think we've talked about it before, how difficult it is to eat well in this country. The food options are everything's set up for this to be the case. Food is more preserved. You go to the store once a week, once every 2 weeks in some cases. And, but in other places, like in Europe or, in big cities, like if you lived in the city when they have more, not that it's more resources, but there's resources are easier. Mm-hmm. So you just, go down and you walk past the market and you just buy things on your way home. One, you're walking, and two, you're buying fresh food on a daily basis or every 2 days, If you look in Europe, if you ever stay in a place over there like a timeshare or stay in a hotel as a kitchen, the fridge will be absolutely tiny.
Very small.
Very, very small. And if somebody's apartment, if you visit, the fridge is very, very small. And the cupboard space is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
There's not this big storage idea like we have in the suburbs where we have these massive kitchens, double-sided fridges.
The suburbs really allow us to be gluttonous. They allow our pantries to be full, our freezers to be full, and we can get all these processed foods from Costco, and then we can live forever off of them. Yeah. It's really a nasty thing.
It's an error. Like that's a huge error in thinking, and it's thought to be an advantage. But if you think about it from a true health standpoint, what you said there is really important, I think.
I know.
Because you hear a lot of people that like eat organic and, farm their own foods. This is a little bit of where they're coming from. Some of the reason they're in those positions is they feel that way, and the data is really, really strong to support it, as you're seeing with your own monitor.
Yeah, very, very hard. I have to try very hard. My kid now, I don't think I'm going to be the insane dad and stick one of my kids with this thing, but at least they're watching me do that, and then I'm educating, hey, when you're at school and you have these choices, Help me understand, do you know? So how I coach my kids is I say, if you want to build up your body, what do you eat? And what's the healthy version of that? If you want to have good energy for your soccer game, what should you eat? And what are the good options there? To kind of coach them, I just kind of coach those two things because they get too nuanced. But my 8-year-old can handle that lesson. She knows exactly what builds up her body and what gives her good energy. And she knows if it's not one of those two, then she might be making a choice. It's like, I don't know if that's a good choice or not,
Yeah. It's interesting. We had this conversation. I had a patient this morning I saw. She's 13, tore MPFL. She had MPFL reconstruction. And in the eval today, first meeting her, she's a little spitfire of a little thing, little soccer player, plays multiple sports, really good athlete apparently. Mom's super healthy, super fit, is great. And in talking with the girl at the, towards the end of the thing, it's a pretty straightforward rehab process. We're at 3 weeks out. She's in the brace. We're doing the basic exercises. There wasn't a lot to talk about. There's not a lot of pain. So I always incorporate, okay, what are you eating? Especially at this age group, how do you eat? And she's like, oh, I don't eat very much, first is what then she said. And she's like, but I eat good stuff. And I'm like, all right, what are your favorite foods, And she's like, well, I like steak, I like chicken. She was really good at eating fruit, And I said, well, how about green things? I always say it like that. Do you like green things? And she's like, no. And then, will you eat fish? Absolutely not. I was like, okay. So I looked at Mom and said, so she's 13. It's hard to go wrong. But if we wanted to do this the right way and maximize healing, it would be really good if she had, balanced nutrition and, fish, oils, fats are really good for this type of tissue. We're growing ligaments. Mm-hmm. We're trying to work on tendon strength and muscle strength. Mm-hmm. Like a fish oil, if she's not going to eat fish, would be a thing. And she's like, yeah. She goes, that thing I give you? And the girl's like, that big old thing, The mom's like, yeah. She goes, yeah, that's what he's talking about. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to take that, But so they were aware, which was clearly Mom was aware, but trying to get the kid to buy in. So I think as a doctor, it's a part of our process to help do this. So we got her convinced at the end that I said, do you eat green things? And she's like, no, but I like green grapes.
It's green. Yeah, it's
her mom's like, she can do fruit. And then on our picture, in our booklet, we have a picture of food, and it's very, very colorful. And there was a green apple on the picture. I said, well, that counts. I said, how about the broccoli or the green beans or, asparagus? She's like, oh, no. I'm like, all right, we need to expand your horizons here a little bit. I said, the more colorful this is, the more balanced your nutrient intake is. And it's a simple process. So I don't know how much headway we made, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah. But she definitely took the message.
Well, I can definitely appreciate, even when we're talking with an adult, you kind of have to have learning in small steps. There's not many of us that can have this phenomenal transformation on every level and do it all differently, starting Monday. I think we all need to kind of get into this with, making smarter decisions kind of in a step-by-step process. And you are unwinding what big ag in Western, industrial civilization has done to us. We're rewriting, the past 100 years in the West. That's hard. And, when I go to the grocery store and I look at I feel sorry for them because I feel like I'm not sure how much all of that is poison. And I'm not sure how much that is influencing your pain. And that's the crazy part is that person with shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, or the chronic disc herniation that the doctor says this is with you for life. Well, then they eat those foods. Like, you're not developing a body that can positively adapt to stress. Because in the end, you come to physical therapy, we do some cat-cows and butterfly and Thomas stretch, and now we start challenging you with a plank and a step up and a knee drive and a T-hold. And if you don't have the body, the foundational layer to adapt to stress because it's too busy fighting off the inflammation from the food and poison that you're eating, you're going to suffer. You will continue to suffer. Mm-hmm. And it's the base layer in our pyramid for a reason. And if you don't get that ship right to some degree, then really, I do have to wonder if exercise is not just a waste of time, but you actually might be trying to injure yourself with certain exercises because you just don't have the foundation layer to adapt.
And this can be the people that do that, where they start exercising and they're like, every time I exercise, stuff starts blowing up on me because you have part of the stress tolerance because your body's busy doing other work. Yeah. So that could definitely be part of the equation. You mentioned about the triglyceride levels.
Yeah.
I think this is interesting.
Dr. Casey Means, I'm going to give a lot of credit to her. If you have the ability, I'm going to cite it again. Dr. Casey Means, read the book, Good Energy. But she'll say the normal range, they'll say if your triglycerides are under 140, kudos to you. She's going to say, F that. She wants your triglycerides below like 80 to 90. And if possible, she wants you to reverse the ratio of triglycerides over HDLs, meaning she wants your HDLs higher than your triglycerides. Now that's hard, folks. That's really hard. It means you have to not eat all of the processed sweet stuff, and then you have to eat all of the healthy fat stuff. So you have to do the right things and avoid the bad things and move enough. And then you start to see those ratios start, ticking closer and closer to one another. But if your triglycerides are 70 and your HDLs are 75, talk about a win. And that's hard. You could probably try for a whole year to try and make that happen and create the habits. But once again, if you lived on a farm and grow your own food, it might be a lot easier. You wouldn't have any choice. But we go to the grocery store and we have choice, and that's what kills people, is the vice of an addiction to grain and to sweet and to alcohol and the bad fats, which is anything that's fried and crunchy. Because if it's crunchy, it's most likely not a good fat.
Yeah,
I haven't met a crunchy avocado or a crunchy fish out of the sea unless you cook it with a whole bunch of crap oil. So if it's crunchy, it's probably bad fat.
Speaking of that, I want to come back to that. I don't want people get the wrong impression about that meal that you suggested. That may have been the worst meal I've ever heard you ingested in my life, knowing you.
Yeah.
It
was bad. Well,
it's not your norm.
No. I showed up on a Saturday and I ate what was given to me by the person I was seeing for the day. It was a family member.
Yeah.
And I told myself, you know what? I'm just going to take all this health stuff. I'm just going to eat whatever is given to me. And it was horrible. Oh, I so wish I had this CGM when I went to Disneyland, because I'm sure it'd have been off the rocker. I'd had cotton candy and I think I'm dying right now. So I actually made it a point, I'm just going to eat whatever the food is. And ooh, that was bad. Yeah.
That was enriching. We've thought about having a segment consistently. I still think we should do a social media segment on Lunch with Russ. I still think this would be a highlight in anyone's lifetime, to just follow Russ around for a week and look at the lunch options. It's incredible.
I try hard with the fish, friends. So I had to go back and forth between, some wild-caught salmon or some wild-caught tuna. And I discovered Primal Kitchen. Primal Kitchen makes avocado mayonnaise. It's phenomenal. First ingredient's avocado. And there's no other crap oil in it. So it's got egg whites and avocado and vinegar. 3 things. and it's awesome. My kids love it too. So I put that with some, pickles.
And you'll put peanut butter on anything.
Yeah. I've been trying to convert more to the almond butter. That's been a harder conversion. So I do.
And then getting that in a pure form, I'm sure, is almost impossible.
Yeah. You want to get the stuff without the sugar.
Yeah.
So if you can just get almonds, you look at the ingredients, you only want to see either peanuts or almonds. But I try the almond butter for sure. And then I mix in 1 or 2 fruits. Sometimes the celery, but I don't. But I've been a big fan. I've been trying to get the kids on a broccoli spinach combo. They're a little resistant. But,
I couldn't imagine why.
I know, but I'm not going to give up. They're just going to. Dad, is this it?
Broccoli spinach combo.
Yeah.
How's that go?
Cooked. You just do a little olive oil and garlic, and just do a slow simmer, and let the spinach kind of wilt down, and let the little broccoli florets kind of get tasty.
Love it. You do something with, you usually do a banana as well.
I do a banana. Yeah, Men's Health tells me I need a banana.
Do you mix that with certain things? You said peanut butter and banana.
Yeah, sometimes I learn something. That's the problem with me. I learn something, I make a change, and sometimes I forget what I learned. But there was a really cool man supplement. I think it's called ZMA, zinc, magnesium. I don't know what the A is. That's the problem when you ask me too many questions. I forget what the A is for ZMA, but nonetheless, when you have bananas, it supports. Pretty sure it supports good mineral health. So I think there's a little bit of magnesium in there, but I have banana with a little bit of peanut butter, and I'll mix in usually a cutie or a tangerine. I'll have some fish. I'll have a yogurt, which I now know I can't have
tuna or
sweetened.
salmon on the fish, or usually your 2 options.
Mm-hmm. Or yesterday's or last night's meat. So I did do some chicken and some steak last night. So today was not a fish meal. Today was a chicken meal.
You get a decent amount of fish in, but not in the traditional. I think the where you get your salmon fillet is really an interesting option.
Yeah.
And then you do tuna like out of the can and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The safe catch. I guess I try and live with principles, and so I'm a pretty strong principle that people should be spending the most money on protein because it's the most nutrient dense food, and it's the most corruption of big ag is in meat. So if you're buying $2 a pound meat, that might be very unhealthy. And if you're spending $15 per pound on meat, that might be the better choice. So because I think of human practice, big agriculture, and how things are made, there's the most problems with creating a protein. You can get the worst fish that are in a cesspool of their own crap in the water, and you can get the worst beef that's in, again, a cesspool of their own crap on land. And so when you're finding the proteins that are nutrient dense because they are extrapolating, both fish, cattle, and chicken, they're extrapolating energy from the ground, hopefully green, but not green. That's the problem. Hopefully it's green energy from the ground that the sun enriched. So if the sun enriches the seaweed and the sun enriches the grass, then you want the animal that eats that green grass, and that from the sun gets you the healthy fat and not overly fat because they've been moving around. But if they were fed the wrong thing, which for all land animals is grain-fed rather than grass-fed, then it's going to be a poor protein file. It's going to have much more omega-6s in the fat. It's probably going to have more fat to it, and because they didn't move around as much. So between having enough movement and eating the right food that comes directly from the sun, that's the key thing here. And so then you get the nutrient density, which costs money because it took land and space and having grass. So that's going to be like a 3-4. So on my grocery bill, it's a lot more on protein.
The California cow is a real thing.
Yeah.
Sun and grazing the grass all year long.
Should be in the sun.
Yeah, the commercial makes some sense.
Yeah.
Leah sent me a picture the other day of steaks from Safeway. It was $51 for 4. I almost died. I was like, holy moly. Maybe it wasn't even 4, maybe just been 2. I was like, wow. Like, it was
what kind of steaks were they? Were they like a New York or like New York ribeye? Something like a fillet.
It may have been a ribeye, but it still seems rather expensive for the size it was portrayed.
Yeah, well, I guess if it was a 16-ounce.
Yeah, it's a 2-pack for $51. Ribeye. $24 a pound.
Oh, that's a strong. So I'm hoping that's like a grass-fed or something that's like.
It's 100% guaranteed. I don't know if it guaranteed.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the funny part is as you then ask these questions, and you have to learn what the whole USDA choice is. Or,
this is just USDA choice beef. It's nothing fancier than that.
Yeah, I mean
you're probably a master of that label.
I mean, kind of. You do kind of have to put your trust somewhere. I used to shop a lot at Whole Foods and the Nugget, and then now I do both a blend of Safeway and that, and I just try and find the best foods, but it's not easy. It's I think that's what stresses a lot of people out is they just don't know and they don't take the time to know.
I think you convinced me to get my own cow. I hear you.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do. You want in on it? You need a cow?
Yeah, we did that a while back. I love that. The kids like ground beef, and if you have ground beef that's somewhat lean, at least cook the fat away. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's good.
Yeah, fair.
But I've learned when you buy a cow, you get a lot of ground beef. You get like 2 fillets and 100 pounds of ground beef.
Because you've done that where you buy like a half or a quarter or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's not quite the ratio I just said, but you get a lot more ground beef than you might think.
Yeah, there's a lot of it in there. Okay, another popular news of what's going on in the world. Relatively tragic here on this front in some ways. I mean, obviously anyone to lose their life, but the United Healthcare CEO. I mean, you saw the video, I assume. It
looked like he got professionally.
Yeah. This is definitely not like wrong place at wrong time. Like this is a person that was hunted for sure.
Yeah.
Because there was other people like walking by and like this person showed no dismay whatsoever that that's the guy. And
he looked very relaxed. Oh, what a horrible situation for the boss of a big arm of the whole insurance world. United Healthcare is like one of the top 5.
Yeah, so the guy's like only 50 years old, which is amazing. And I have no knowledge of his actions or anything, but I would say this about United Healthcare that we've brought up before and talk about frequently is that it's one of the few healthcare insurance companies that's traded on the market, period. Mm-hmm. And it's in the Dow. Mm-hmm. It's the only group that's in the Dow. So the top 30 companies, in the U.S., but essentially, people consider maybe in the world, most profitable companies is who's on the Dow. United Healthcare is number 8. So that in alone is like a problem. When you're a healthcare company and you're, many of it's like Blue Cross is a nonprofit. As a hedge example, like to say that you're the most profitable. Well, how do you, at the end of the day, you have an income stream that is premiums of insurance, right? And then you have a exit expense list beyond your own staffing that's paying bills, paying people's bills, right? So the easiest way to make that profitable is either have a very lean staff that's ineffective or use high levels of technology, which I can tell you they do not, because we work with United every day on their operations and process, and they are fairly highly regulated. They regulate us quite a bit, where if we want to see a person, we have to apply for so many visits. We have to work with them back and forth many times, which means it's highly regulated, which means there's more touch points than necessary to manage a person's health care, which has an increase in cost.
That's right. This is the bureaucracy cost.
This is the bureaucracy cost. They have to have more employees monitor this, because it's not automated. It's not like you just put it in a system and you get this automated response. Like there's actually a person touches it, which is just ridiculous. That increase the regulation threshold, eliminate the job, and then you save the money and you can afford to spend it on the person who invested in you in the first place by buying the premium, right? So obviously to be on the Dow, there's a balance there. And they've said many times, I've watched, Kramer was a big fan of United Healthcare at one time. I've watched many like press releases because it's on the Dow, there's many, the CEO, he was on his way to give the third quarter data numbers and such. And there's many evidences of United Healthcare saying that one of the biggest reasons they've been so successful, and they praise their success, is because of their Optum branch, because Optum is doing such a good job managing care. Well, Optum happens to be the group we work with that does all the regulation about.
It tells us we can't treat.
Hey, you want to make the claim? Optum says nope, denied, or Optum says nope, you need authorization to do that. Nope, you can't do this. You need this and that. So it's highly regulated. Well, United Healthcare owns them. They made it out like it's a third-party neutral company. Not the case whatsoever. It's owned by United Healthcare. They operate and manage it and certainly guide its actions. And they act like, oh, it's just a third party. So who knows what this is about? I know that there were some other issues around like the numbers as far as like actual income versus expenses and some of the P&L stuff. And there was some manipulation on numbers, and the stock, I think, had a rapid drop. I didn't look at the history, but either a rapid increase or a rapid drop. And there was thought to be some insider trading that happened in a recent history that may have had a factor here as well. But I don't think it was just an unhappy client. Unless to go out and look like they hired a hitman or someone was.
I think you are speaking to the philosophy of the Western world. We like to think that to some degree we live in a state of capitalism, but we also have definitely socialist arms of how the United States works. And it's not like the insurance company operates with the free market, where you could have a disruptor that comes out with their own insurance. It's when you say regulated, I think more pages, more legality to it, more check boxes, more bureaucracy, and they make it very difficult for another player to do things differently, to do things more efficiently, to become dominant. I think when you look at whether it's like finance or healthcare, there's only a few players that have been present in the last 20 years, and it's stayed like that. Why? In a market where I think in any good healthy market, you have competitors that drive excellence, they drive efficiency, and they encourage disruption, because I think every healthy arm of the world needs to be disrupted, because that's what leads to innovation. Or else you get stale, you get bloated, so to speak. And the insurance realm, along with generalized healthcare and hospital systems, is very hard to disrupt them, because it has so much regulation tied to the government. It's kind of like, could you really distinguish between these big companies and the government? It's not like the same thing. So I think it's very challenging. I think when you look at this type of unfortunate murder, it's a deep-seated point to make that this system is very difficult for the average person to have success in, to pay their premiums, and not to justify. I think is a horrible thing. And I think having the leader of such a big arm, of the insurance world, how could he possibly have ownership of every bad thing that the company might do? But therein lies, I think, the difficulty. I don't think it's very healthy for us to have just only a handful of companies to choose from with insurance.
Yeah, that's all really good point for sure. I mean, as the CEO, he has to own it end to end, and he couldn't possibly know about all the details and things, But at the same time, what's the vision of the organization that he set forth? Is the vision consistent with what's going on? And
yeah,
I don't know how you have a healthcare company and you set up a vision that puts it on the Dow.
It's kind of like doesn't make sense. You're like, hey, we're up this year, which kind of implies that we didn't pay out, any benefits.
Yeah,
that means your shareholders win because someone didn't get that elective surgery that they really were hoping for, but they just didn't have all the boxes checked.
Yeah,
that's the direct causation there.
Yeah, there's games they'll play. I've heard a lot of games being played too, like around end of the quarter, end of the year, and we'll see this a little bit in our financials. We probably don't have enough of it to see huge trends, but we'll see that as far as reimbursements go, they might be a little slower towards the end of the quarter or the end of the year, and they get pushed into the next. When we get paid by an insurance company, it might be beneficial to them to put, instead of paying $10,000 on January 31st or December 31st, you better pay that on January 1st.
Yeah,
and be like, let's just push that into an expense that's in the next quarter, and therefore it looks like we were a little more profitable. And if they did that to 10,000 users, 10,000 providers, well, that's moving a couple $1 million into the next quarter, so they can make their numbers
look a little better. If you have a shareholder or a board that's deeply concerned about your financial budget on that year, how would you not play that game? You could easily hide it in some algorithm or some delay or some it's too easy to manipulate. There's too much true conflict of interest, and I think I have learned a lot from the book Freakonomics. The economist in that book over and over talks about every system in the world throughout time, and all you have to do is ask, where is the unintended incentive? What is unintended? You thought you were doing something, but instead you didn't foresee this incentive that do something. And if we always just count on altruism so that people aren't steered in the wrong way, that's bad, because we're human.
Yeah,
and people will rationalize and they'll follow groupthink, and all it takes is one other person to kind of nudge that way. Oh, it's not so bad. I think I'll lean that way. And so, if there was ever incentive to do the wrong thing, it's just a matter of time, where you get the right amount of power and money and finance, and it just starts shifting.
Yeah, and those decisions become, like you said, the decisions become justified.
Yeah, and the next thing you know, we have the situation where it's like, well, how did this happen? And I think the details on the story were there were words on the 3 casings found on the ground, and 2 of the words are aligned with a book out right now that talks about the fraud going on in insurance companies.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I forget the words. They're like
something about deny.
Yeah, deny and debunk and something. Delay, deny and delay. Yeah, and defend. Yeah, that's the best.
Defend, deny, delay.
Yeah,
interesting. But I'm not familiar with it, but I did see that.
Yeah, I think
I didn't realize it's about insurance companies. It makes perfect sense now that we deal with them. I know exactly. Yes, they do that.
Yeah,
they do deny. They do delay.
I think 2 things can be very true in this unfortunate case. Is really sad, unfortunate murder that happened to I'm sure a good person, but it does represent like there is something probably not quite right about our current system, and that is what led to this. Yeah,
it simulates it. So apparently he's found, they got him, 26, 27 years old. And he went to an Ivy League school, went to Penn. Sounds like he went to Penn, to University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school. So interesting.
Yeah.
Usually a 27-year-old wouldn't have a whole lot of interaction in healthcare. They don't even know it's a problem yet. But maybe he's got a parent or something that's gone through some stuff. It doesn't take much to really get mad.
Yeah,
I will say that for sure.
Yeah,
where if you watch your parent, or if you have someone in the healthcare, like needing healthcare, not someone who's providing, but somebody who needs healthcare, and you go to them to the appointments and you kind of watch the process, you can really appreciate the dysfunctional experience that it is. It's absolutely painful. We do it in sports, and our passion in sports is to try to do what's done in the pros, where if you get an injury in the pros on Sunday, by Monday or Tuesday, you have the answers.
Yep.
You've got an x-ray, you've got an MRI, you probably met with at least one, if not two orthos by then.
Yep.
You've certainly met with the training staff and the PTs, and there's a plan that's in place within 48 hours.
Yep.
It's very doable. It's very practical. It's excellent.
Yep.
But in the private sector, because of the insurance companies, not because of anything else, the process is that same process might take 6 to 12 weeks.
Yep.
And it's all about authorization. It's also about approval. Doctors have to write in and request you to get approved for an MRI. Like, who would an insurance company be to deny the MRI?
Yep.
A licensed medical provider requested the MRI. Like, who's questioning that?
Yeah.
And I agree that there needs to be some questioning, but on a 16-year-old that had a knee injury this weekend, it's pretty straightforward. Like,
Yeah.
it's justified.
Well, I think you also have to look at big rocks, even with our company, you look at the big rocks that really kind of like shake things, from how we impact the community, but also look at the big rocks of what shakes us from the expense report, and if you look at the grand scheme of things of healthcare, the 16-year-old that had severe trauma, you're not sure if they need surgery, and they get an image that costs the insurance maybe $1,300. Like, really? You're gonna put a bureaucrat behind a desk and kind of delay things for a few weeks until they're gonna spend 3 to 4 hours, which might cost $300-$400 a delay, a $1,400 image, when all the other components of ER, ICU, the whole mass. You'll be at the hospital in the ER for a few hours and get charged $10,000. So I'm not seeing this like as an important rock for them to get heavily regulated on. It's like kind of like the wrong spot to put your focus.
This is one of the reasons we're getting destroyed in the world when you think about like where we're at in healthcare. Like, we talked about why we have one of the unhealthiest populations, probably because of food. So that'll be interesting to see how that gets addressed in the next terms here. And then the other thing is just actually how we manage people healthcare wise. I've had 2 stories just in the last week. One of a really worldly CEO guy is a client, and he was in South Korea, and he describes like going through a medical process in South Korea where he was having something going on with his digestion. He was sick, so he ended up going in to a center there, and it wasn't even an urgent care; it was a center. And within 45 minutes, he had met with the doctor for about 5 to 10 minutes. The doctor ordered all the tests. All the tests were done. He met back with the doctor, gave him the outcome of all the tests, gave him the recommended medications, recommended intervention. With 45 minutes, he was out the door, paid, all tests done. And I heard a similar story. I don't remember if this one was in Singapore or India, but it was in that Southeast Asia region, and it was the same thing. Only this one, it included an MRI and X-ray, MRI, and some other testing. Again, done in less than an hour. All done easily, and I think the total bill was less than $200 for the MRI, the doctor, the whole thing. It's the reason that we charge like $1,400 for an MRI and probably more than that now is there's no reason.
No reason.
It's ridiculous.
Yep.
Absolutely ridiculous.
All it takes is the right incentive. I'll tell you, to do a slight pivot, so we've been pushing our research, our nonprofit arm of KIME, and to do research for the world. And this is a pivot that we talked about, still in the making. But if we incentivize doing the right thing for the world, let's start with that principle. And to treat disease is helpful to the world, but it's not changing the world. It's helping when they're broken. How can we influence people before they go down the disease path, before they get down the injury path? And you can. It's just there's not at the moment. There's not a lot of money in it, but could we change that?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're trying to do is see can we incentivize the physical therapist for KIME to save an ACL, and then what would the cost be? And that's a really interesting philosophical question. What's the cost to save an ACL? And to do that, you need to know how many ACL tears there are and what sports they happen, and then what type of intervention do you need to reduce the risk of ACLs. And if you did the same thing, I imagine you would reduce the risk of ankle issues, hip issues, and back issues as well. Hopefully help people get healthier in the process, be less likely to injure themselves to a devastating degree, which with all the cascading events that come from devastating injuries. And that's fun. So what does that look like?
And two things happen there, right? That person is less of a burden and cost to the healthcare system for their life, right? Because we know that if you do have that injury when you're in high school or college or in your younger years, the odds of you having arthritis are greater. The odds of you needing a knee replacement in your future are greater. And Medicare is going to pay for that eventually if we're doing that in the U.S. because when you're over 65, that's paid for by them. That's a $100,000 process. So if that could be avoided by the injury being avoided in the beginning, that's a huge savings. Plus, you get this now instead of an injured person, you have a healthy person going into society, which can be hopefully much more productive in some form. Maybe they're going to go into fire or police or some sort of labor work like construction or something where you're having a healthy body helps increase their productivity and what they give back to the world.
It's the right mindset. Now, whether or not we had the right formula, time will tell. But if we could have more companies with orthopedic surgeons and nurses and hospitalists and internists and general practitioners and pediatricians, if people could start being aligning toward actually changing the future, I don't think it's hard. I think you have to be a little creative. You have to be thoughtful.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I go back to thinking about like Gray Cook, like one of my mentors, and wrote such good books on movement and stuff in the past. But one of his statements was that a lot of the problems we see today, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, a lot of those that we see in this population in this country are a result of mismanaged orthopedic injuries from their youth, right? So someone hits an ankle sprain or they get a knee injury, and then what happens? Well, it takes a long time to get back to running. By then, maybe they don't play sports anymore. Maybe they never get back to running, and they don't actually ever run again, or they don't run very much. Well, then what happens? You start gaining some weight, start becoming a little more obese. You lose all of your goals to be competitive in sports and take care of your body and do the right things. You start going down the other path, and that leads to being overweight, which gets you the obesity check, which leads to cardiovascular disease and diabetes.
It's the compounding effect in the worst way.
Yeah. So it's an interesting way to look at it for sure.
I think
so. What's that worth is the question.
Yeah. All of healthcare needs this pivot. How it looks, I think, is a bit creative, but it's really fun to be in a state where we're going to try and make a difference.
Absolutely.
We will. Just got to quantify it and report it and see how it goes.
Back to the insurance front, just to add one more fact that I think just to throw out there so people are aware of this is interesting. So there's like kind of 7 big insurance companies out there. You know, you've got Blue Cross and Blue Shield, which in California is mixed, but everywhere else is separate. Then you have Cigna, United Healthcare, and of course there's Medicare, TRICARE. Aetna is another big player, is one of the other big guys. Aetna, a couple of years ago, actually purchased CVS Pharmacy. So when you think that you have like CVS, and then there's one other group that's Walgreens are the 2 biggest pharmacies in the country. And for one of the insurance companies to buy the pharmacy, think about it from a cost control standpoint.
Yeah.
Like think about that.
Interesting.
Like you're basically and all these insurance companies are trying to create networks. So basically what Aetna did is it has a network of people that have Aetna insurance. And if they guide everybody to say, hey, the approved pharmacy is CVS, is the in-network pharmacy. Walgreens is now out of network. And so now we want you to go to CVS. And then, but we control the cost of everything at CVS, so we can really drop that cost like crazy. So now you're paying a premium that would usually get you a certain drug, but we control how you get the drug and who distributes it. So we can control what level you get, do you get generic or not, what the cost is, the whole thing.
They learned from Kaiser.
Yes. So when you see like an HMO option in insurance, just to explain the business model here, you have to understand that what you're signing up for, or Medicare Advantage is the same thing. Any of these groups, Hills Physicians, a big group across the country, these are groups where they control the network. So you get a discounted insurance rate to agree to go inside that network, Kaiser being probably the lead example in this case. Well, that allows them to control the cost because they control the networks, they control the cost. So if they know how much you're paying for insurance, they can then control the cost, how much they pay out to you to go get your claims taken care of. And the agreement is that as a user, you will stay in the network so they can control your cost and control the situation. And a lot of them put gatekeepers on these things. And that's why it's like, well, before you go get an MRI, you have to go to physical therapy for 6 weeks first, fail that, and then we'll get you an MRI. I hear that language all the time. Many of the groups require that type of process. And it's like, I mean, granted, that helps us as therapists, but it's not the right care.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you in the first session if the person needs an MRI or not.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't need 6 weeks. But they're trying to have this standard and this distinct algorithm, trying to play it like a machine that has all these rules. And the problem is we're all extremely custom with custom needs. And so it kind of is like, I can see part of the dream there, but we see it fail over and over. So.
If I can decide in the first eval session that the person needs MRI now, obviously the doctor already decided it,
Yeah.
So like
if you have a 2-point agreement,
he can do it too. He can do it too, and should just take his word for it from the beginning. But even then, it's ridiculous how much extra bureaucracy they put you through, and such a waste.
Yeah, well, I think that's the big part. Is as soon as you start building the bureaucracy arm, it does mean that two natural things occur. You're going to have increasing costs associated with that, which is going to have its own embedded inefficiencies, unless you're an administrative, king or queen that runs that arm. But also, it does mean more finance, more cost for the user, and less finance for the provider that went through all the education just to do the service. And I think at a very basic principle, if we can have more money shuttled to people doing the hard work on the ground, that's a good thing. If you look at a construction worker fixing the freeway, you hope that the majority of the monies that are in those funds goes to that person that's at 2 a.m. in the cold working on the freeway. Well, you wouldn't want 40% of it to go toward a remote worker on the beach just chilling, while they sign off on the time card for that guy to kick butt at 2 a.m. Yeah. So you'd want the majority of the monies to go to the people that are really providing the work, and the administrative arm needs to be just run efficiently. I think that's what administrative people want as well. They want to make sure that, because that's their degree of excellence, is they're running off of, I can power all of these people by being efficient in my excellence. I think that's the kind of key thing. And if insurance companies can do that, well, that's a sweet spot for their model. And, I'm not so sure about the for-profit model, because it seems like it was only a few of them. They need to be on a fair, level playing field.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, coming down to what you said, can we open up the door to more competition so it's not just a regulated market? There's a great conversation that came up a couple of days ago with Mark Cuban around drug prices, and part of the conversation was how limited the market is, that it's actually illegal for us to discuss what we get paid by an insurance company for care to anyone else. Like the contract states right in there, you're not allowed to discuss these terms with anyone else. So you have this very binding, closed-off term agreement that doesn't allow basically people to unionize or come together, legally, and say like, hey, this is below what it should be. No one knows what the average or the standard is. It's controlled by such a small group of people. Yeah. These 7 companies, and then the people that they influence, which is obviously the political figures that make the laws. So it's relatively brutal. But I think things are going to get flipped around a little bit here, so this would be kind of interesting. So
this disruption, all innovation comes from disruption.
Yeah,
so and we need to be ready to break it down to build it back up.
It's a win for everybody. Like, doing the same old thing for 30 years is way too long, and the speed of everything else is changing. I mean, the fact that we didn't have an iPhone to 2007 and now you can live without one is a good example of that.
Yeah. So I think this is exactly what being progressive is actually, it is to innovate. And innovate is not a small incremental change in the same exact way you've been doing it. It's disruption. So you have to allow that discomfort, which is part of my discomfort of like having this thing, I get the slap in the face when I look at my app of how good the meal was. I'll tell you right now. See, I had the meal coming in. I had chicken and rice and a piece of fruit and a Lara bar. And right now I'm 114. So that's my post-meal activity.
And there's a high there. You definitely had a little bit of you're up a bit.
Well, I did a workout. So the workout ramped me up, and then I ate after the workout. Kind of a weird flip. No, I guess.
Looks like you were down around 90 there before.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying a lot harder. That meal I told you about, that was me definitely not trying hard. Now I'm trying hard. You got to be a little data friendly, but I love it. For those listening, I'm using the Stello app made by Dexcom. It's like $50 a sensor. You buy 2 sensors at a time. Super easy. I've already recruited like 3 or 4 people. Tim Lyons is on it. He saw that. I showed him. He's like, send me a link. I'm buying it now. So
it's awesome. So it's a good tool. I mean, it's one of the few tools you have to get blood information right then and there without having to prick your finger very often.
Yeah. Disruption. It can be a good thing if you're ready for it.
All right. Thanks for watching KIMEcast. We'll see you guys in the next round. If you guys can comment, we'll engage with you. Please share any comments, thoughts, things you have, insights on the issues. Love to engage with you on that and respond to you there. So you can DM us. You can hit us up on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Feel free to comment in there. We'll engage with you there. Looking forward to it.